But I want to pick up on a point that you made about tax. Ayodeji, we've had this conversation before, talking about the fact that we need to have more taxable items. And the Federal Ministry of Finance actually said that there are some, items that now will be taxed, like luxury items, some luxury items, for instance. And the Federal, Inland Revenue Service has actually stepped up their game. But I will still talk about the short to medium term, because that's what we're looking at. Nobody's actually, always out for a quick fix. But because of the situation that we found ourselves in, it seems as if we need a quick fix. So in the short to medium term, how quickly can the FIRS, work to ensure that we have more revenue coming in from taxes?
I think it would be interesting to note that the informal service sector constitutes about 25% of total GDP. And when you look at the tax evasion in that particular space, is significant. So in terms of, it's good to acknowledge that the FIRS have done a little bit of work to increase the tax base. But government needs to come up with policies such as incentive of encouraging the informal sector to get enlisted as a formal sector, such that they can easily be captured within the tax space. When you look at the revenue, when I said 25%, that's like over $125 billion from that particular space. So when you look at the revenue that can be generated in this particular space, it's significant, and it's just going to be like a low-hanging fruit for the government to take advantage of. So what they need to do is there have not been significant incentive to encourage people, encourage small and medium-scale enterprise to get involved in the formal sector. When you look at registration process, it takes, you need to incur significant costs to register your company. And also the requirements after even registration, the follow-up, the disclosure may need to be relaxed a bit, such that they are able to capture more, informal sector within the tax space. So if they are able to do that, most of the firms, the reason why small, medium scale that wants to get listed or be formal is because of capital, but most of them don't have access to capital. When you look at 90% of the funding within the small and medium scale space is done by personal savings. So most of them, because there's no collateral to access the loan, the business, there's no financial statement that the banks can even access before they can ascertain the cash flow to see whether they can earmark, they can access the fund. So some of these things needs to be solved, and they need to encourage them. With that, I feel there will be significant revenue that can be earned through tax from the informal sector.
Okay, so that's the informal sector. Edgar, do you think that there are any other low-hanging fruits that at this time can really, show up?
Yeah, I think basically it takes a whole lot of strong will, from the managers of the economy. We know every year there are firms that are springing up, and as they are getting registered on, with Corporate Affairs Commission, I tell you the regulatory authorities are supposed to have information as to these organizations, whether they are just startups or they've been existent or maybe just change of name and all that. I can tell you that it's not as if they've not been going to these firms to collect taxes, but I can tell you still the same leakages that I mentioned. So it takes a very strong will for you to be able to say, okay, I am going to sanitize the system. If, I don't know, probably even with the privatization, if they can privatize that service, probably it will be more effective. But when you have, government agencies, I'm sorry to say, it becomes, weakened, because it's like a national cake that everybody is looking for loopholes to divert funds to their private pockets. If we can have that strong will to be able to go out there, do the necessary assessment, and remit these funds, as a when due, I tell you, we'll, overcome a whole lot of shortages coming from that angle. But the
Ministry of Finance has actually been showing that strong will. If they hadn't, or if they weren't, we wouldn't have heard about the recent plugging of that leakage of the 208 billion naira that was saved from ghost workers.
That is what I'm talking about. That is a different angle to tax now. that is from ghost workers in institutions, the private sectors,
No, we
the
just,
ministries and development.
no, we just
Yeah.
want to, highlight the fact that it doesn't seem as if they've been folding their arms and watching things,
Yeah,
go the way
they're
they
doing
go.
that. I think there is still room for improvement. That is what I'm saying. They still have to do more, going out to get these funds from these private sectors. Again, see, we are looking at businesses are shifting from the street to online. How are we tracking, the activities of this firm? I can tell you there are a whole lot of people making money from their rooms.
And they're not paying tax. But why do I have to pay tax if I'm doing online?
You are doing business in Nigeria. You are having economic benefits. So tax is more like you are giving back to the society, giving back to your government, for them to be able to provide. Now, the internet you are using is occupying certain space in Nigeria. Of course, who provides the platform? It's all about ICT. Communication and telecommunication. You understand? So you just have to, give back to the society. But I'm telling you, there has been little or no, consideration, to this new segment of business that is happening online. I don't know how many of them are paying tax currently, but I can tell you so many businesses are doing, are going on online and are making a whole lot of money.
Let's look at another gold mine that is just waiting to be tapped, the solid mineral industry. That's one that I know that the federal government has actually identified. Some minerals like coal, iron ore, tin ore, and even gold. But is there a strong drive to actually harvest from this industry?
Yeah, it takes a very deliberate effort on the part of the government to implement some of the policies that they have formed. They said they've been able to identify over 33 minerals resources in Nigeria. So it takes, I think our government needs to bring in and partner with private sector in exploring that particular space, because what government tends to get from it will be royalties. So like what it's obtainable in the oil sector, which accounts for over 90% of revenue in the mining space, since the oil sector is classified under mining. There are some joint venture contracts, sharing production contracts that operates within the oil space. So if this, there can be legislation around trying to encourage the private sector such that, yes, that is why it's an enabler that gives confidence that if I start to, because it's long term, if I bring down my equipment over a particular time, I'm sure that I'll be able to recoup my investment and with significant return for taking the risks of coming to the country. So if there's a structure that encourages the private sector participation, and there's consistency, there's been in legislation that there's a backing that within that particular space, I feel it will attract investors. When you look at in terms of tin ore, which is a really significant input to, we're trying to do based on the motto, when you look at the motor vehicle policy assembling plants, that means they have to bring in the parts. But some of these parts, we have the resources or the raw materials to produce these parts. And when you look at what the employment that particular space can even generate, is massive. It's just like agriculture, that takes a significant, requires significant labor. So it's a sector that I feel government should also try and create time and improve efforts in that particular space.
And when we come back, Edgar, we're going to take up from still on the solid mineral sector, but we're going to focus more on how things can be stimulated in that particular industry. All right, so hold on to your thoughts. You're watching Business Morning on Channels Television. On the program, we've been looking at the economy and focusing on some key drivers of the economy that can boost key sectors also of the economy. I've been having a conversation with Ayodeji Ebo. He's the head investment research at Afrinvest, and Edgar Ebo. He's the head of research, Cowrie Assets Management Limited. Both gentlemen will be here with me when I return in just a moment. Please join us again.